You're not sick. Your wife's and stuff in your food.
What did you just say to me?
8 words. Paige whispered them to the frail billionaire, knowing she could lose everything.
Stay away from him!
Vivian lunged.
Did this filthy black woman just touch my husband?
Madam, I just...
Shut up! You're rubbish. A walking disease. People like you are harder to train than guard
The whole
dogs.
table burst into laughter. Paige stood there, burning, eyes stinging, hands trembling. She wanted to run, but she'd seen it. The vial. A single drop in his wine. And she couldn't watch a man be harmed. So she leaned in again.
Please. She's poisoning him.
Get out!
He hissed. She walked away with a breaking heart. That whisper had just ignited a war. 3 days earlier, Paige Ingram had never heard the name Hargrove. She was just trying to make rent. Paige was 23. She worked 2 jobs and slept maybe 4 hours a night. Mornings, she stocked shelves at a grocery store. Evenings, she picked up catering shifts wherever the agency sent her. Weddings, funerals, rich people's parties. It didn't matter. A shift was a shift, and a shift was money. And money was the only thing standing between her little sister and the street. Her name was Naya. She was 16, smart. The kind of smart that should have come with a scholarship. Their mother had passed 8 months ago. Cancer. Fast and cruel. What it left behind wasn't just grief. It was a stack of hospital bills taller than the kitchen table. So Paige paid. Bill by bill. Shift by shift. You can do this, she told herself most mornings. Some mornings she almost believed it. When the agency called about the Hargrove estate, Paige said yes before they finished the sentence. She had never seen a house like it. The gates alone were taller than her apartment building. A driveway curved past fountains and trimmed hedges shaped like animals. Inside, the ceiling soared 3 stories high. Chandeliers dripped crystal. The marble floor was so clean she could see her own tired face in it. It was beautiful, and it was cold. Not cold like winter. Cold like a museum. Like nobody actually lived there. Like the whole place was holding its breath. Paige noticed things. She always had. When you grow up with nothing, you learn to read a room fast. You learn who's angry before they speak. You learn which smile is real and which one is a knife. It was a survival skill, and in that house, her instincts would not stop buzzing. The first thing she noticed was the glass. There was one crystal goblet, set apart from the others. Heavier, older. It sat only at the head of the table, where the old man sat. And only one person ever touched it. His wife. Paige watched her pour his wine herself. Every time. She waved the other servers away. "I take care of my husband," Vivian would say, sweet as sugar. "Always have." The staff thought it was romantic. Paige thought it was strange. Then she saw the old man, and the strange feeling turned into something heavier. Walter Hargrove was a legend. Everyone in the kitchen whispered about him. Real estate. Towers with his name on them. A fortune most people couldn't even imagine. But the man at the table didn't look like a legend. He looked like he was disappearing. His skin was gray. His hands trembled when he lifted a fork. He'd stop mid-sentence and stare at nothing, like he'd lost the thread of his own thoughts. Twice during dinner, he pressed a napkin to his mouth and closed his eyes, waiting for something to pass. "He's dying," one of the cooks murmured in the back. "Doctors can't even name it. 6 specialists. Nothing." "Poor man," another said, "and his wife never leaves his side." Paige said nothing, but she watched. She watched Vivian rest a gentle hand on Walter's shoulder while her eyes scanned the room like a hawk. She watched her laugh at the guests' jokes a half-second too late. She watched the way Walter flinched, just slightly, when his wife leaned close. Small things. Tiny things. The kind most people would never catch. But Paige caught them. And somewhere underneath all that marble and money, a quiet voice in her head started whispering a question she didn't want to ask. Why does a man surrounded by the best doctors in the country keep getting worse? She pushed it down. It wasn't her business. She was the help. She was invisible. That was the rule, and she knew it well. Serve the food. Clear the plates. collect the check, go home to Nia, don't get involved, don't make trouble. Trouble was a luxury people like her couldn't afford. She told herself all of that, and she almost listened. But the next night, the agency sent her back to the Hargrove estate, and what she would see in that kitchen, with her own 2 eyes, would make staying silent impossible. The next evening, Paige arrived early. She always did. Early meant you got the better stations. It meant the manager noticed you, in a good way, not a bad one. Her manager's name was Gregory Pace. He ran the catering crew like a man who enjoyed the small power he had. "You're late," he said the second she walked in. She wasn't. "It's 6:40. Call time was 7. "Don't argue with me." He didn't even look up. And about last week's check, there was a problem. Payroll's holding it. Paige's stomach dropped. Holding it? For how long? "However long it takes," he smirked. "You got somewhere to be?" She did. She had rent due in 4 days. She had Naya's school trip, the one her sister was too proud to ask about but kept leaving the form on the counter, hoping. She had a future balanced on a paycheck that a man like Gregory could freeze on a whim. "No," Paige said quietly. "Nowhere to be." "Good. Then get to work." She swallowed it. She always swallowed it. Because that's what hardship teaches you. It teaches you to keep your face still while everything inside is screaming. It teaches you that being right doesn't pay rent, and pride doesn't feed your sister. So Paige tied her apron, lifted her chin, and went to work. The Hargrove kitchen was a storm of silver and steam, but even in the chaos, Paige's eyes kept drifting to one person, Vivian Hargrove. The lady of the house didn't belong in a kitchen, and yet there she was. Every evening, right before dinner, she'd float in wearing diamonds, smiling at the cooks, asking about their families. To everyone else, she looked like a devoted wife checking on her husband's meal. But Paige watched the eyes. The eyes never matched the smile. And then there was the little ritual. Vivian kept a small leather case. Inside it, tiny bottles. "His vitamins," she explained to anyone who glanced over. "Walter won't take them from anyone but me." Stubborn old thing. She'd tap a few drops into his glass, stir his sauce, press a capsule into his evening tea. The staff found it sweet. Paige found her skin crawling. Because she'd also been watching the old man. Walter Hargrove was no fool. You don't build an empire by being slow. And Paige began to notice something nobody else did. He was fighting back. Quietly. Desperately. She saw him slip a pill into his napkin instead of his mouth. She saw him tip his special glass, just slightly, letting wine spill onto the tablecloth so he'd have less to drink. She saw him push food around his plate, eating only the bites Vivian hadn't touched. It was like watching a man trapped in his own house, sensing the danger, but unable to name it, unable to prove it, unable to trust his own mind, because everyone around him kept saying the same thing. "You're sick, darling. The doctors agree. It's all in the illness." How do you fight an enemy when the whole world insists it's only your imagination? Paige's heart ached for him. A billionaire, surrounded by servants and specialists, and somehow the loneliest man she'd ever seen. "It's not my business," she reminded herself. "Keep your head down, collect your check, go home." She carried that thought all the way into the kitchen for the next round of plates. And that's when she saw it. Vivian was alone at the prep counter. She thought no one was looking. The cooks had stepped out to the walk-in. The room was empty. Except for Paige, frozen in the doorway with a tray in her hands. Vivian slid a small glass vial from her sleeve. Not a vitamin bottle. Something else. Dark glass, no label. She uncapped it, glanced over her shoulder, and tilted it over Walter's plate. 1 drop. 2. 3. Then she stirred it in, calm as anything, and set the dark vial back into her sleeve like she'd done it 100 times before. Paige didn't breathe. She stood there, tray trembling in her grip, as Vivian picked up the plate, fixed her perfect smile, and carried it out toward the dining room. Toward Walter. And in that moment, Paige understood. This wasn't her imagination. This wasn't her business or not her business. This was a man's life. And she was the only one who'd seen the truth. Paige had a choice to make, and she had about 10 seconds to make it. She could keep her head down, walk the empty trays back, finish her shift, take her frozen paycheck, and never think about the Hargrove estate again. Or she could open her mouth. She found Mrs. Coleman first. The old housekeeper had worked the estate for 30 years. If anyone knew the house, it was her. Paige pulled her into the pantry. "Mrs. Coleman, I need to tell you something. About Mrs. Hargrove." The old woman's face changed instantly. Fear, plain and fast. "Don't," she whispered. "But I said don't." Mrs. Coleman gripped her arm. "There was a girl before you, a nurse, sweet thing. She started asking questions about Mr. Hargrove's medicine. What happened to her? Gone. One day she was here. The next, Mrs. Hargrove said she'd stolen from the safe. Police came. No proof, but her name was ruined. Nobody will hire her now." She squeezed harder. "You're nobody here, child. So am I. People like us don't win against people like them." Paige's heart hammered. Every word made sense. Every word told her to stay quiet. She thought about Naya, about the rent, about the paycheck Gregory was holding hostage. She had everything to lose and nothing to gain. Then she pictured Walter at that table, spilling his wine on purpose, hiding pills in his napkin, a man drowning in plain sight while a whole house watched and called it love. And she knew she couldn't carry that plate to him and pretend she hadn't seen. So she made her choice. She picked up the water pitcher, a reason to approach the table, and walked into the dining room. Her legs felt like water. Her pulse roared in her ears. She reached his chair, leaned down, and whispered the words you already heard. "You're not sick. Your wife's putting something in your food." You know what happened next. The lunge, the insults, the laughter, the hiss of "get out." But here's what you didn't see. As Paige turned to leave, humiliated, her eyes swept the room one last time, and they landed on something on the far wall. A camera, old, small, tucked above the bookshelves in Walter's study, just visible through the open doors. She'd heard Vivian mention it once to a guest. "Oh, that old thing? Broken for years. Walter keeps meaning to take it down." Broken. Convenient. Paige filed it away without knowing why. Just an instinct. The same instinct that had been buzzing since the moment she walked in. Then she pushed through the kitchen doors and kept walking, out the service entrance, into the cold night air. Behind her, she heard Gregory's voice. "Ingram, you're done. Don't bother coming back. We don't keep troublemakers." Just like that. The job, gone. The check, probably gone with it. Paige stood at the bus stop, shaking, and not from the cold. She'd done the right thing. And the right thing had cost her everything she couldn't afford to lose. She called herself a fool the whole ride home. She'd risked it all for a man who'd called her a liar to her face. A stranger who would forget her by morning. She was sure of it. She was wrong. Because at that exact moment, across town, Walter Hargrove sat alone in his enormous bed, staring at the ceiling. And for the first time in months, a single terrible thought refused to leave him. What if the girl was right? That night, Walter Hargrove almost died. It started an hour after dinner. The room tilted, his chest seized. Cold sweat soaked through his shirt. His heart slammed like a fist against a door. Vivian was there in seconds, calm and soothing. "It's the illness, darling. I'll call Dr. Crane." The doctor came. Same words as always. "His condition is progressing. We must prepare ourselves." But this time, lying in that bed, gasping, Walter wasn't listening to the doctor. He was hearing a waitress's voice. "You're not sick." He'd dismissed 100 warnings from 100 experts, but that one whisper, from a girl with nothing to gain, would not leave him alone. By morning, the attack had passed, and Walter Hargrove made a decision of his own. He didn't tell his wife. He called his oldest friend instead. Not a doctor, not a lawyer, but a man he trusted more than either. His estate manager from the early years, a quiet, sharp-eyed man named Harold Brooks. "Harold," he said into the phone, voice low. "There was a girl, catering staff, last night. I need you to find her. Quietly." It took 2 days. The agency didn't want to give up a name. But money opens most doors, and Harold knew which ones to knock on. Paige was at the grocery store, restocking cereal at 6 in the morning, when a black car pulled up outside. A man in a gray coat stepped in. "Miss Ingram? Mr. Hargrove would like to speak with you. No one else will know." Paige's blood went cold. "I already lost my job over this. Is he sending lawyers now? Police?" "No, miss." Harold's voice softened. "He wants to listen." She almost said no. Every survival instinct told her to walk away. But she thought of Walter spilling his wine, fighting alone, and she got in the car. The meeting wasn't at the mansion. It was a small office downtown, away from Vivian's eyes. Walter sat at a bare table, looking smaller without his empire around him. Gray, tired, but his eyes were sharp. "Sit," he said. She sat. "You whispered something to me at my own table," he said. "Then you walked out and lost your job for it. So tell me, why? What do you get out of this?" "Nothing," Paige said. "I get nothing. That's kind of the point." Walter studied her for a long moment. People had lied to him his whole life. For money, for power, for favor. He'd learned to smell it. And this girl, sitting across from him in a worn coat, with tired eyes and a steady voice, smelled like the truth. "Tell me everything you saw," he said. So she did. The special glass, the vitamin case, the dark vial with no label, the 3 drops over his plate when she thought no one was watching. Walter's hands curled into fists. "You understand what you're accusing my wife of?" "Yes, sir." "You understand I could destroy you for it. 1 word from me and you'd never work again." "Yes, sir." Paige didn't look away. "But you asked me why, so I told you. What you do with it is yours." The silence stretched. Then Walter exhaled and something in his face cracked. The careful mask of a powerful man slipped, and underneath was just a frightened human being. "For 3 months," he said quietly, "I felt myself dying. And every doctor tells me it's natural. My own mind tells me I'm imagining things. Do you know what that does to a man? To stop trusting your own thoughts?" He looked at her. "You're the first person who's said out loud what I've been too afraid to believe." "Then let's prove it," Paige said. He blinked. "Prove it how?" "Simple." She leaned forward. "You're sick because of what goes in your body. So for the next few days, nothing goes in your body that she touches. No special glass, no vitamins, no tea she makes. You only eat and drink what I prepare, sealed, where she can't reach it. If you get better, then I have my answer," Walter finished slowly. It was a quiet plan. No police, no accusations, just a test that couldn't lie. They began the next day. Harold smuggled Paige into the estate under a new name, as a temporary kitchen hand. It was risky. If Vivian recognized her, it was over. But Paige kept her head down, her cap low, and her hands busy. Invisible, like always. For once, being overlooked was a weapon. Every meal she prepared Walter's food herself. Bottled water opened in front of him. Fruit she washed and cut at the table. She quietly swapped his special glass for an identical clean one. Vivian poured her drops into water Walter never drank. The change came faster than either of them expected. Day 1, the tremor in his hands eased. Day 2, the fog in his head began to lift. He finished a full sentence without losing the thread. Day 3, he walked the length of the garden, something he hadn't done in 2 months, and turned to Harold with tears in his eyes. "I can breathe," he whispered. "My God, I can actually breathe." Paige watched from the kitchen window, and her chest tightened. It was working. Which meant the worst possible thing was also true. A wife really was killing her husband. Slowly, lovingly, in front of everyone. That evening, Walter called Paige into the study, the one with the old camera on the wall. He poured 2 cups of tea, both from a kettle he'd boiled himself, and handed her one. A billionaire serving a waitress. He noticed her surprise. "My whole life," he said, "I had hundreds of people around me. Servants, partners, friends. And not one of them saw me. Not really. You did. A stranger I never paid a cent." He shook his head. "Funny, isn't it? The quietest voice in a loud house told the truth." Paige smiled just a little. "Where I'm from, the quiet ones see everything. We have to." Walter set down his cup. The warmth left his face, replaced by something harder. The businessman was back. The fighter. "She thinks I'm dying," he said. "She thinks she's won. That's our advantage." "What do you mean?" "I mean, we don't tell anyone I'm better. Not yet." His eyes glinted. "Let her keep playing her game, while we quietly build a case that will bury it." Paige felt a flicker of fear. "She's dangerous, Mr. Hargrove. If she finds out, then we'd better be careful," he said. But careful or not, neither of them knew that Vivian Hargrove had already started to wonder. Because a dying man wasn't supposed to be walking through gardens, and she had begun to ask questions of her own. For a few days, the house breathed easier. At least it did for Paige. Walter was stronger now, color in his face, steadiness in his hands. He hid it well in front of Vivian, slumping his shoulders, faking the tremor, leaving food on his plate. By day, he played the dying man. By evening, in the locked study, he came alive. And in those quiet evenings, the billionaire and the waitress talked. Real talk. The kind he hadn't had in years. "I have a daughter," Walter told her one night. "Claire. We don't speak anymore." "Why not?" "She didn't approve of Vivian. Said she married me too fast, watched me too closely." He laughed, bitter. "I told Claire she was jealous. I chose my wife over my own child." He stared into his tea. "Turns out my daughter saw what a stranger saw, and I called them both liars." Paige said nothing. "Some wounds you don't poke. You just sit beside them." "You remind me of her," Walter said softly. "Stubborn, honest, too brave for your own good." For the first time, Paige felt something other than fear in that house. She felt seen. Walter paid her too, quietly, generously, far more than catering ever had. Enough to unfreeze her life. Enough to imagine Naya's school trip happening after all. "This isn't charity," he told her. "This is wages for the most important job in my house. Keeping me alive." She let herself hope. Just a little. Hope was dangerous, but she let it in anyway. What neither of them noticed was the shift across the mansion. Vivian had stopped smiling so easily. She lingered in doorways. She watched Walter eat. She counted the drops in his glass and frowned when his health didn't crumble on schedule. And one afternoon she cornered Mrs. Coleman in the hall. "That new kitchen girl," Vivian said sweetly. "The quiet one. Where did she come from?" Mrs. Coleman kept her face blank. "Agency, ma'am. Temporary." Vivian's eyes narrowed. "She seems familiar." She walked off without another word, and Mrs. Coleman stood frozen in the hallway, her heart pounding, knowing she would have to warn Paige. Because the hunter had caught a scent. Mrs. Coleman found Paige in the pantry that evening. "She knows your face," the old woman whispered. "Maybe not your name yet, but she's circling. Be careful, child. Be so careful." Paige nodded, her mouth dry. But careful wasn't enough. Because Vivian Hargrove didn't circle for long. She struck. And she struck like someone who had done this before. It began the next morning. A scream from the master bedroom. "My ring! My grandmother's ring is gone!" The whole staff was summoned to the grand hall. Vivian stood at the top of the stairs, eyes red, clutching a tissue, the picture of a violated woman. $20,000, she sobbed. "An heirloom. Gone from my jewelry box. Someone in this house is a thief." Walter stepped forward, playing weak, leaning on his cane. "Vivian, calm down. We'll find it." "I already know who took it." Vivian's tear-filled eyes locked onto one person. "Her. The new girl." Every head turned to Paige. I've never been upstairs, Paige said, her voice steady even as her heart dropped. I work in the kitchen. Liar. Vivian descended the stairs slowly, each word a blade. I caught you wandering the halls. Don't deny it. People like you always want what isn't yours. That's not true. Search her things, Harold tried to intervene. Mrs. Hargrove, there's no proof. Search her things. They did. And there, tucked inside Paige's worn coat in the staff room, wrapped in a kitchen rag, sat a diamond ring, glittering like an accusation. The room gasped. Paige stared at it, the world tilting. That's not mine. I've never seen it. Someone put it there. Of course you'd say that. Vivian turned to the room, voice ringing with triumph. I want the police called. Now. Theft. And who knows what else this woman has touched in my home. My husband's been so ill. Maybe we should ask her about that, too. And there it was. The masterstroke. Vivian wasn't just framing Paige for theft. She was flipping the entire story. If Walter ever got sicker, or worse, there would already be a suspect. A poor black girl, caught stealing, lurking in the kitchen, near his food. She had built herself the perfect scapegoat. Paige understood it all in a sickening flash. The trap had never been about a ring. The ring was bait. The real prize was making Paige the poisoner, so Vivian could finish the job and walk away clean. Walter, Vivian said, sliding to her husband's side, gripping his arm. Tell them. Tell them I'm right. After everything I do for you. After how I care for you every single day. Walter looked at Paige, then at his wife. The whole room waited, and Paige saw the doubt flicker across his face. Because the trap was good. It was so good. The ring was right there. The accusation made sense. And a lifetime of being lied to had taught Walter that the obvious answer was usually the true one. For one terrible second, even the man she'd saved wasn't sure. Call the family lawyer first, Walter said finally, before the police. We do this properly. It wasn't a defense, but it bought time. Vivian's eyes narrowed. She'd wanted police immediately, but she couldn't argue without looking suspicious. Fine, she said coldly, but she stays locked in the staff quarters until they arrive. I won't have a criminal roaming free. They took Paige away. The room they put her in was small and bare. A cot, a barred window, the door locked from the outside. She sat on the thin mattress and finally let the tears come. Silent, furious tears. She'd done everything right. She'd told the truth. She'd saved a man's life. And the truth had landed her in a locked room, branded a thief, one phone call away from prison. This is what Mrs. Coleman warned me about, she thought. People like us don't win against people like them. Meanwhile, downstairs, Vivian was not idle. She summoned Dr. Crane to the study. Behind closed doors, their masks dropped. The girl's been replacing his food, Vivian hissed. That's why he's not declining. He's been eating clean for a week. Crane paled. If he's recovered, the toxin will start clearing his system. Any independent test now could... Then we move up the timeline. Vivian's voice was ice. Tonight, a larger dose. By morning, his heart simply gives out. Tragic, natural. And the thieving kitchen girl who'd been near his meals takes the suspicion if anyone ever asks. She smiled. We bury him a grieving widow, and she rots in a cell. It's too fast. It's reckless. It's necessary. Vivian opened the door. Prepare it. Up in the locked room, Paige pressed her face to the barred window, helpless. But she wasn't as alone as Vivian believed. Because two people in that house had been watching Vivian as carefully as Paige once had. The first was Harold Brooks, who had quietly recorded every word of the search, and who'd noticed that Vivian knew exactly which coat to point to, before anyone said it was Paige's. The second was Mrs. Coleman, who'd spent 30 years learning every hidden corner of that mansion, including the air vent that ran from the upstairs hall straight down past the study. She'd been standing at that vent. She'd heard every word between Vivian and Crane. Tonight, a larger dose. Mrs. Coleman's hands shook, but her mind was clear. She climbed the back stairs to the locked room and slid a folded note under the door. Paige unfolded it with trembling fingers. They're going to do it tonight. Bigger dose. Mr. Walter is still in danger. Harold and I are with you. Don't give up. See. Paige read it 3 times. The fear was still there, but something else rose up beside it now. Anger. Clean, bright, righteous anger. They thought she was nobody. They thought she'd sit in this room and break. They thought a poor girl with no money and no name would just disappear like the nurse before her. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Paige stood up. She wiped her face, and she started looking, really looking, at the room around her. The window, the hinges, the old vent in the ceiling. The same sharp eyes that had caught a single drop of poison now scanned every inch for a way out. She had until nightfall, and somewhere below, in a kitchen she knew better than anyone, a fresh vial of poison was already being prepared for the man who'd finally believed her. The family lawyer arrived at dusk. His name was Nathaniel Wood, and he'd handled the Hargrove affairs for 20 years. Vivian expected a formality, a signature, a phone call to police, and her trap snapping shut. She did not expect Walter to pull the man aside, alone. "Nathaniel," Walter said quietly, dropping the frail act the moment the study door closed. "I need you to listen to me as my friend, not my lawyer. My wife is trying to kill me, and the girl she locked upstairs is the only reason I'm still breathing." Nathaniel stared. "Walter, that's a serious—" "I know how it sounds, so I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm asking you to help me prove it. Tonight." That was when Harold stepped in, phone in hand, and played the recording from the search. Vivian's voice, sharp and certain. "Check her coat," spoken before anyone had named whose coat it was. "She knew," Harold said. "She planted it." And then Mrs. Coleman knocked, pale and breathless, and told them what she'd heard through the vent. Tonight, a larger dose. His heart simply gives out. The room went silent. Walter sank into his chair, the weight of it crashing down. The woman he'd defended against his own daughter. The wife who fed him by hand, planning his death over the dinner she'd serve in hours. "What do we do?" Mrs. Coleman whispered. Nathaniel Wood, calm and methodical, took charge. "We don't accuse her. Not yet. Accusations she can deny. We need evidence that can't be argued with. 3 things. He held up a finger. 1. Proof in his body. Walter, we get a sample drawn tonight. Blood, hair, and sent to an independent lab. Not Crane. Someone with no connection to this house. A second finger. 2. Proof in the glass. We recover that special goblet and the residue in it, and whatever's in that dark vial. A third finger. 3. Proof of intent. Harold's recording is good, but we need more. We need to catch her." It was Paige, brought quietly down from the locked room by Mrs. Coleman, who had a spare key after 30 years, who solved the 3rd problem. She walked into the study, still shaken, and pointed straight at the wall. "That camera," she said. "Vivian told everyone it's broken. She tells everyone things are broken when she doesn't want them looked at. The vitamin case, the glass. Why not the camera?" Walter frowned. "It's been dead for years. Has anyone checked? Or did she just say so?" Harold crossed the room, pulled the small camera from above the bookshelf, and opened the casing. His eyebrows rose. "It's not broken," he said slowly. "The lens cap's been taped over, from the outside. Someone disabled it by hand, and left the recorder running underneath." He pulled a small memory card free. "This has been recording audio this whole time. Maybe more." Paige's heart leapt. She thought it was dead, so she stopped hiding in here. They plugged it in, and the study filled with months of evidence. Vivian's voice on the phone. "He's nearly done. A few more weeks." A man's voice answering. "Dr. Crane." Talk of the life insurance policy. The new will. Dollar amounts. dates. And then, chillingly recent. The kitchen girl's been swapping his food. We move tonight. Nobody breathed. That's it, Nathaniel said quietly. That's a conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, all of it, on record. But the recording also revealed something darker. Crane wasn't just a corrupt doctor. The dates lined up with the death of Walter's first wife, years ago. A death everyone had called sudden heart failure. Vivian and Crane had done this before, to someone else, and gotten away with it. Walter put his face in his hands. When he looked up, his eyes were wet, but his jaw was iron. "We don't call the police yet," he said. "Walter," Nathaniel started. "She's poisoning my dinner tonight, in front of guests. She's already invited half the city to watch the devoted wife care for her dying husband." A grim smile crossed his face. "So, let's give them all a show. Let her pour the drink. Let her lift the glass. And let everyone, every guest, every camera, every witness, see exactly who she is." He looked at Paige. "You whispered the truth once, and no one listened," he said. "Tonight we say it out loud, where the whole world can hear." Paige felt the fear melt into something steel-hard. Tomorrow, she'd been nobody. Tonight, she was about to help bring down a killer. The dinner party glittered. 30 guests, crystal and candlelight, the cream of the city, gathered to pay respects to a dying titan and his devoted wife. Vivian wore black, already rehearsing her widowhood. She moved through the room like a queen, accepting sympathy with practiced grace. "He's so weak now," she murmured to a senator's wife. "I just want his last days to be peaceful." At the head of the table sat Walter, slumped, pale, hands trembling. The perfect picture of a man near the end. It was the finest acting of his life. Across the room, dressed as kitchen staff with her cap low, stood Paige. Her heart pounded against her ribs. Near the doors, Harold waited. In the study, Nathaniel Wood sat with a laptop, the recordings cued. And outside the gates, unseen, 2 unmarked police cars idled, called 20 minutes ago on Walter's signal, the moment the plan was set. Dinner was served, and Vivian began her ritual. She lifted the heavy crystal goblet. She poured the wine herself, waving off the server. "I always take care of my husband," she said warmly, to a ripple of admiring murmurs. Then, as she set the bottle down, her hand drifted to her sleeve. The dark vial. The same practiced motion Paige had seen a week ago, but this time, Paige wasn't the only one watching. Walter raised his hand. "Before we drink," he said, "I'd like to make a toast." His voice was strong, too strong. The trembling was gone. A hush fell. Vivian's smile froze. Walter stood. Not slowly, not weakly. He rose to his full height, color in his cheeks, eyes clear and burning. The dying man was gone. In his place stood the lion who'd built an empire. "For months," he said, his voice carrying to every corner, "I believed I was dying. The doctors agreed. My wife agreed. I nearly agreed myself." He smiled at Vivian, and it was terrible. But a young woman, someone this whole house treated as invisible, whispered 8 words to me that no expert ever dared to say. Vivian's face had gone white. "Walter, darling, you're confused. Sit down." "He's not putting anything in his mouth tonight, Vivian." Walter's voice cracked like a whip. "But you were about to put something in his glass, weren't you?" The room rustled, confused, tense. "This is absurd," Vivian laughed, but it came out brittle. "He's ill. He doesn't know what he's saying." "Then let's let the room decide." Walter nodded toward the study doors. "Nathaniel." The lawyer stepped out, laptop in hand, and pressed a key. Vivian's own voice filled the silent hall. "He's nearly done. A few more weeks. The insurance pays out clean. Just keep him on the dose." Gasps. A glass shattered on the floor somewhere. Then Crane's voice, unmistakable, answering her. And worse, the recent one. "The kitchen girl's been swapping his food. We move tonight." A larger dose. His heart simply gives out. The blood drained from Vivian's face. She spun toward the doctor across the room. Crane was already backing toward the exit, straight into Harold, who blocked the door with crossed arms. "That recording is fake!" Vivian shrieked. "He's framing me! That filthy girl put him up to this!" "The lab isn't fake." A new voice, calm, cold. Every head turned. A woman walked through the front doors. Sharp suit, sharper eyes. Walter's breath caught. "Claire," he whispered. His daughter. The one who'd warned him. The one he'd chosen Vivian over. She crossed the room and laid a single sheet of paper on the table. "Independent toxicology report," Claire announced to the room. "Drawn from my father's blood this afternoon. Processed by a lab with no ties to this family. Heavy metals, a cardiac toxin, accumulated over months." She looked at Vivian with pure ice. "Exactly the kind of slow poison that mimics natural illness. Exactly what you've been feeding him." "And this," Harold added, holding up an evidence bag with the dark vial, lifted from Vivian's sleeve in the chaos. "Matches. We'll let the police confirm it." The word police landed like a bomb. Vivian's mask finally shattered. The grace, the warmth, the grief, all of it fell away, and what stood underneath was something cold and clawing and cornered. "You ungrateful old fool," she spat at Walter. "I earned that money. I sat by your bed. I held your hand. Do you know how long I waited for you to just—" She caught herself, but it was too late. The room had heard enough. And then she made her last mistake. She lunged for the crystal goblet, to dump it, to destroy the evidence. But a hand got there first, Paige's hand. She'd crossed the room without a sound, the way she always moved, invisible until the exact moment it mattered. She lifted the poisoned glass high, out of Vivian's reach, and held it steady. "No," Paige said quietly. "Not this time." The two women stood face to face, the billionaire's wife in her diamonds, the waitress in her apron. A week ago, Vivian had called her trash, a disease, something born to disappear. Now Vivian was the one with nothing left. "You," Vivian breathed, recognizing her at last. "The kitchen girl." "The one who whispered," Paige said. "You should have listened, too." The front doors opened. Two detectives stepped in, badges out. What followed was chaos and order all at once. Crane tried to run and made it 4 steps before Harold and a detective brought him down. Vivian screamed about lawyers, about lies, about her name, but the recordings, the report, the vial, and a room full of the city's most respected witnesses left nothing to argue. As they clicked the handcuffs onto her wrists, Vivian turned one last time, searching for an ally in the crowd. She found only horrified faces. The same people who'd kissed her cheek an hour ago now stepped back from her. And there it was, the thing she'd promised would never happen. The proud woman who'd humiliated a poor girl at this very table was led out in cuffs, head down, weeping, past the waitress she'd called worthless. The detectives also reopened a cold case that night. The sudden death of Walter's first wife, years ago. Vivian and Crane, it turned out, had rehearsed this murder before. This time, they wouldn't walk away. When the doors finally closed and the guests had fled, the great hall fell quiet. Walter walked to Paige. This towering man, this empire builder, stood before a 23-year-old waitress with tears running freely down his face. "I called you a liar," he said. "I told you to get out, and you saved my life anyway." "You believed me when it counted," Paige said softly. "That's all that matters." Walter turned to the few who remained. Claire, Harold, Nathaniel, Mrs. Coleman. His voice shook, but his words were clear. "Remember this night," he said. "I had everything. Doctors, lawyers, a house full of people. And the only one who told me the truth was the one person every one of us was trained to overlook." He looked at Paige. The quietest voice in a loud house told the truth. I almost died not listening to it. Outside, the patrol cars pulled away into the dark. And inside, for the first time in a very long time, Walter Hargrove was safe, because a girl with nothing had refused to stay silent. The weeks after were quiet, in a way the Hargrove estate hadn't been in years. Vivian and Crane were charged on every count: attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud. With the older case reopened, neither would see freedom again. The diamonds, the will, the insurance scheme, all of it collapsed into a single word: justice. But Walter Hargrove wasn't interested in revenge anymore. He was interested in repair. He called Paige into the study one morning. This time, there was no fear in the house, just sunlight on the marble. "I owe you a debt I can't repay," he said, "but I intend to try." He slid an envelope across the desk. Paige opened it and stopped breathing. The hospital debt, every cent that had buried her since her mother died, was paid in full, gone. "That's just the beginning," Walter said. "I'm starting a foundation. Scholarships for kids like your sister. Kids who are brilliant and broke and overlooked." He smiled. "I'm naming it after your mother, and I'd like you to run it." Paige looked up, stunned. "Mr. Hargrove, I serve food. I clear plates. I don't know how to run a foundation." "You knew how to see what sick specialists missed," he said. "You knew how to do the right thing when it cost you everything. I can teach you spreadsheets, Paige. I can't teach what you already have." She cried then. Not the silent, swallowed tears she'd learned in a hard life. Real ones. The kind you cry when, for once, the world tips in your favor. Naya got her scholarship. She started at a school with a science lab Paige could never have dreamed of paying for. On her first day, she hugged her sister tight and whispered, "You did this." "No," Paige said. "We did. Mom did. We just kept going." Walter and Claire began to heal too. Slow at first. Years of silence don't vanish overnight. But they had Sunday dinners now. Real ones, in a kitchen where every glass was just a glass. And Paige didn't forget where she came from. Her first act running the foundation was to track down the nurse, the one fired before her, the one whose name Vivian had ruined. She cleared it, got her hired at a good hospital. She found Mrs. Coleman a pension she could finally retire on. She even helped Harold's grandson into college.